Today we have the U.S. Senator from Connecticut and the person who led the charge in the Senate to pass legislation aimed at reducing gun violence. Chris Murphy, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, great to be back. Thanks for having me.
So this gun bill has been signed into law. There was a signing ceremony at the White House. First off, could you outline what's in this new law?
Well, this is the most significant piece of anti-gun violence legislation that Congress has passed in 30 years. It's undoubtedly going to save thousands of lives. It's not everything we need to do, but it is a really important start. At the heart of this bill is funding for state red flag laws. These are the laws that allow you to take guns away temporarily from people who are threatening to kill others or themselves. States are going to be able to implement new laws or improve their own laws because of almost $1 billion in funding. It closes the boyfriend loophole. This means that no longer will boyfriends who beat up their girlfriends be able to own guns. If you're convicted of domestic violence against a non-spouse romantic partner, you now are on the list of those prohibited from owning or buying guns. It puts in place a new law to go after gun traffickers. We have these gun trafficking rings, which buy guns in states with loose gun laws, transport them to states with stricter gun laws. Now we have new federal abilities to lock those folks up. A whole new process for selling guns to people who are under 21. That involves an enhanced background check, which includes a call to the local police department. Think of what might have happened in Highland Park if the 4 times that guy bought a gun, every single time there was a call first to the local police department. The police department might have been able to intervene. And then a whole bunch of mental health spending. So $15 billion in community anti-gun violence funding and mental health spending. That money alone is going to save a lot of lives because it's maybe the biggest one-time investment in mental health spending since the Affordable Care Act in this country. So really excited about all of those provisions. I think we're talking about a life-saving bill here.
There were some outstanding issues with Republicans on 2 points in particular. They were the first 2 points that you named: closing the boyfriend loophole and how to structure federal funding for state red flag laws. What was the sticking point on those 2 issues, and how did they get resolved?
On state red flag laws, the compromise we eventually got to was to slightly broaden the eligibility for the money. There were some Republicans who say, well, listen, my state is never going to adopt a red flag law. Shouldn't I be able to use some of that money for other court-based anti-violence initiatives? And so we said yes to that request. And so the red flag law money is technically also eligible to be used for a narrow set of other court-based interventions that could reduce violence. On the boyfriend loophole, the Republicans said, well, listen, if you get convicted of a felony and you get your gun rights taken away, every state has a process by which you can apply to get your rights restored. And that's true. You can get your voting rights and your gun rights restored. Because we actually don't take any rights away, if you commit a misdemeanor, there's really no well-defined path in the states to get your rights restored after a misdemeanor. So we had to set up a sort of new pathway in this bill to get your gun rights back after a misdemeanor domestic violence assault. And so what we said is that if it was your first offense and you commit no additional violent offenses, after 5 years, you can apply to get your gun rights restored. And that was something that the domestic violence groups were comfortable with. It's consistent with state laws around felony restoration. And it was, one of the creative compromises we had to make. I think a very reasonable compromise in order to get this bill passed.
Just on the issue of red flag laws, a little deeper on this issue, the House tried to pass a federal red flag law, and 201 Republicans voted against it. So in terms of offering up federal funding for states to enact these laws, how do you depoliticize the issue so that states actually do enact it?
Well, I actually think that the very act of 15 Republicans and a number of Republicans in the House voting for this law will hopefully signal to Republican state legislatures that there's really nothing to be scared of. In addition, we built into our law requirements that any state red flag law has to meet constitutional due process requirements. So we made it crystal clear that you can't have any red flag law that strips an individual of their constitutional rights. So our hope is that the Republican support for this bill in combination with some of the protections for due process rights, will convince some Republican state legislatures to move forward with these laws. And just look, there are plenty of Republican states that have these laws in which they work very well, from Florida to Indiana. There are plenty of Republican states with red flag laws that are saving lives without robbing anybody of their legitimate Second Amendment rights.
Yeah, and I think you bringing up the example of this latest July 4th shooting is a testament to what could be done to just save lives. I don't think that you need to be a Democrat or a Republican to recognize the significance of taking away a gun from somebody who everybody knows, who it's clear would stand to commit violent acts with it. Just a question on a Republican response to this, and I'm going to use. I'm almost sorry to do this to you, but I'm going to use Marjorie Taylor Greene's tweet. She had tweeted, "The Senate Republicans are everything wrong in the GOP. Too many of them have helped Joe Biden pass his America Last agenda even more than the progressive Democrats in the House. The Republican Party needs a drastic identity change for America to survive, or the GOP won't." So basically, she's coming out and saying, the quiet part, that she thinks Republicans should be more concerned about hurting Joe Biden, even if that means allowing more American kids to die to gun violence. What's your response to not only her, but just Republicans more broadly who are echoing this sentiment?
Yeah, ultimately, you have to decide what your loyalty is to, right? Are you an American first, or are you a Republican first, right? Is your loyalty to the Constitution, or is your loyalty to Donald Trump? I mean, my loyalty is to my country. My loyalty is to my state. My loyalty is to the Constitution. And, when I go back home, I don't hear a lot of people talking like Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mean, I don't hear a lot of people telling me that my primary agenda should be hurting Republicans. People tell me that my primary agenda should be improving their lives. So I just feel like this was a moment when Americans were very clear what they wanted. They wanted Democrats and Republicans to sort of set aside the politics on guns, find the common ground, stop arguing over what we can't agree on, and find what we can agree on. And there's a big fringe element on the Republican side and a smaller fringe element on the Democratic side who are focused only on doing damage to the opposite party. But that's not where 90% of Americans are. And I'm just super confident of that.
Why do you think Republicans decided to come to the table now after ignoring so many mass shootings before and offering up thoughts and prayers while actually relaxing gun laws in most states? Why now? And kind of what does that say more broadly?
I mean, there's an element of this that is personal. I do think that both John Cornyn and Tom Tillis, the two primary Senate Republican negotiators, were deeply personally moved by what happened, especially in Uvalde. I mean, that motivated their decision to come to the table. But I also think we're at a natural tipping point when it comes to the political power that exists on the gun lobby side and on the anti-gun violence movement side. It's heartbreaking it's taken 10 years for that shift to happen. But there simply now are more of us. And there were a lot of Republicans who went back home for that Memorial Day recess right after Uvalde and heard directly from their constituents that they were not going to accept the status quo. They were not going to accept nothing, and that there was going to be real political pain for members of Congress who decided to sit on the sidelines this time. And so I do think that over the last 10 years, this power has shifted from the gun lobby is still powerful, but they don't have as much power. And the anti-gun violence movement and parents have a lot of power. And I think that is what ultimately made the difference this time.
There is this fear that because this bill didn't cover everything, including preventing 18 to 20-year-olds from purchasing semi-automatic weapons, that Republicans will now have cover to say, we did our part, we're done for another 30 years. Even though gun violence will still, of course, continue, and even though we should be continuing to take steps to continue to make people safer, how do we keep the pressure on to continue taking those steps to keep people safe, even in light of what will be that excuse?
To the extent an element of this argument is, and I hear it, right, that people make this, is we shouldn't empower Republicans because they vote for things that make the country better off. We should reject that wholesale. We should be in the business of passing things that make people's lives better. And if that involves Republicans voting with us, great. But on the broader worry, which I understand that this was our one shot. And so we should, if we only have one shot, we should hold out for everything. This is a moment where we actually have the White House, the House, and the Senate. That arrangement may not exist again for the foreseeable future. So we should take advantage of what we have today. But more importantly, as I study great social change movements, once they get their first victory, they very quickly get more, right? Whether it's the marriage equality movement, the civil rights movement, once you get a taste of victory, once the movement sees what action can achieve, once the other side understands that the sky doesn't actually fall when you support reform, all of a sudden more is possible. And that's the moment that I believe we're at when it comes to this movement. I think it is now much more likely that we are going to pass further reform after getting this bill done, because our movement is empowered and the Republicans who voted for this are going to see that there's actual real political benefit to voting with us, and they will do more of it in the future.
I'm reminded of the ACA, which they tried to attack more than 70 times, and it's so popular now that it's actually a death knell for Republicans who try to campaign against it. Look at the 2018 midterms. I'm also reminded of this latest union drive, where the first Starbucks got unionized, and now we have like hundreds of them. And so I think in terms of these like tipping points for good social change, I think that's a testament to that. I just want to mention one more issue that I think is especially outstanding. It's one that I touched on earlier, and that's the issue of 18 to 20-year-olds being able to purchase these weapons. That's obviously one of the most popular provisions that's still outstanding. Where was your group on that, and what is the likelihood of something like that eventually getting signed into law?
So I think that there were Republicans who would have voted to raise the age to buy an assault rifle or a rifle to 21. Remember, right now, you can't buy a pistol. You can't buy a handgun if you are under 21. You can only buy a long gun. And there are many states that actually don't allow you to buy any guns. I think there'll be more states in the coming months that will pass restrictions. So, what you're talking about is a limited group of states that allow under 21-year-old buyers to buy certain weapons. There were Republicans that were willing to raise the age, but not enough to get us to 60. So what we instead ended up doing was building in a waiting period and an enhanced background check. And as I mentioned, I really do think that there's evidence both in Uvalde and Highland Park that had our law been in place, there's a chance that enhanced background check combined with a good red flag law could have prevented either of those shootings. But this is clearly a very popular provision, just simply raising the age to 21. I think a lot of states will get it done. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's a vote in Congress to do this in the foreseeable future. I think a lot of constituents are going to demand that we continue to build upon that enhanced background check.
Before you go, I just want to say that because you pushed for this and because you pushed relentlessly, lives will invariably be saved. And I know that there's a lot more to do and you didn't get everything you wanted, but this law will mean that people, will be able to go home to their families who otherwise wouldn't have because of gun violence. So I know that, you have a very thankless job, but thank you for busting your ass on this because, lives will be saved because of you.
Well, Brian, thanks for spending time on this issue, devoting, a portion of your show to shedding light on what needs to be done. There is so much more to be done, but we should celebrate the breakthrough because that breakthrough begets more victories in the future. So appreciate it.